You don't belong here. Get out before I have you removed." The words landed like a closed fist. The young woman in the gray uniform didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still in the hallway, with a stack of pressed linens in her arms, and stared at the marble floor beneath her borrowed shoes. The one who had spoken, a woman in a silk-wrapped dress the color of champagne, examined her own reflection in the hallway mirror, and adjusted a pearl earring without looking back. Two other staff members pressed themselves against the wall, as if trying to disappear into the wallpaper. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved. The woman in the gray uniform had a name. Maren Aldridge. It was a name that had appeared on the cover of Forbes twice before she turned 30. A name that made venture capital partners return phone calls inside of 4 minutes. A name that had built a commercial real estate portfolio worth just over $1.1 billion from a studio apartment in Newark, and a used laptop that overheated every 40 minutes. Maren had earned every letter of that name. She had slept on an air mattress until she was 25. She had eaten rice and canned beans 5 nights a week, while her classmates from Wharton posted photos of steakhouses and ski trips. She had been told no 214 times in her first year of fundraising. She kept a handwritten tally. When the number hit 200, she circled it and wrote underneath, "Not yet." But here, in this house, in this uniform, she was nobody. That was the point. Her brother Wes was 26. 4 years younger and a full lifetime more trusting. He had a wide smile and an easy voice and a way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered, which was beautiful and also extremely dangerous when aimed at the wrong person. Maren had watched him fall in love before, twice, and both times he had landed softly enough. But this time was different. Sloane Beckford appeared at a friend's rooftop birthday party in Brooklyn the previous October. She arrived late, which was calculated. She wore a dress that looked effortless, which required effort. She laughed at Wes's joke about parallel parking before he'd reached the punchline, which meant she had decided to laugh before he started talking. By the end of the night, Wes had her number saved with a heart emoji next to it. Maren saw the phone screen the next morning and felt something settle in her stomach like cold water. Within 3 months, Wes had restructured his entire life around Sloane. He moved his schedule. He changed his gym. He stopped returning calls from 2 friends who had been in his life since middle school because they had made a single cautious comment about how quickly things were moving. When Maren raised her concern at a Sunday dinner in March, Wes set his fork down before she could finish. "You analyze everything like it's a deal." "I'm not analyzing. I'm noticing. You're doing what you always do. You find the risk in every person and call it insight." He pushed his chair back. "She makes me happy, Maren. I thought you of all people would get that." He left the restaurant before the check came. Their weekly calls became bi-weekly, then monthly, then careful. Then the invitation arrived. Thick cardstock, hand-lettered, sealed with a gold monogram. The Beckford family formally requested the pleasure of Maren Aldridge's company at Crestwood, their estate in Westchester, for a pre-engagement gathering. 2 days, 1 night. A celebration of families coming together. Wes texted the same evening, "This matters to me. Please don't come looking for problems." Maren read the message. She set her phone on the counter and stared at the window for a long time. She had built her business by reading rooms faster than anyone in them. She had survived a hostile takeover attempt at 27 by noticing a clause that 3 lawyers had missed. She understood that the most dangerous environments were the ones designed to feel warm. She thought about what Wes could not see yet. She thought about what she needed to see for herself. By morning, she had made a phone call to a staffing agency in White Plains. She asked for a 1-day placement at a private estate. Domestic service. She gave a name that wasn't hers. She ironed a gray cotton uniform she had purchased online 2 days earlier and removed every piece of jewelry she owned, including the thin gold chain she hadn't taken off since her mother gave it to her at 18. She looked at herself in the mirror. Without the chain, without the posture she'd built, through years of boardrooms and negotiations, she looked like exactly what she intended to look like. Someone no one would think twice about. Crestwood sat on 11 acres in a part of Westchester, where the driveways were long enough to require their own lighting. The house was a stone colonial that had been expanded 3 times, each addition slightly more expensive than the last and slightly less coherent. The garden had been recently replanted. The fountain at the front circle had water flowing at a pace designed to suggest old money. Everything about the property was working very hard to look like it had been there forever. Maren arrived at the service entrance at 7:15 in the morning, a full day before Wes was scheduled to arrive. A woman with a clipboard and a voice like a staple gun met her at the side door. Name? Bridget. You were supposed to be here at 7. The train was delayed. I'm sorry, apologies don't set tables. Come. The kitchen was already in motion. Staff moved quickly and quietly, communicating in glances and small nods. A young man arranging flowers was told his spacing was amateurish. A woman polishing glasses was informed she was holding them wrong and had probably never touched crystal in her life. The corrections were delivered loudly enough for everyone to hear. That was intentional. Fear was the management style, and it was effective. The source of all of it was Vivian Beckford. She moved through the rooms in pale blue linen, touching surfaces with one finger as if checking for dust on a planet she owned. Her voice never rose, which made it worse. She didn't need volume. She had precision. Every comment was a small incision, placed exactly where it would do the most damage with the least visible effort. She told a caterer. His plating looked like a cafeteria tray. She told a housekeeper she had missed a window, and then stood behind her while she cleaned it again, watching, saying nothing, which was louder than anything she could have said. Maren observed all of this from behind a cart of folded napkins. She had met this kind of person before. Vivian Beckford was not powerful. Vivian Beckford was performing power for an audience of people who couldn't leave. By mid-morning, Maren was sent upstairs with fresh towels for the guest wing. The hallway was carpeted and quiet. She heard a voice before she reached the door at the end of the corridor. Sloane's voice, soft and rhythmic, talking to herself. Too eager, Sloane said. A pause, then, better, warmer, but pull back on the eyes. Maren stopped outside the door, which was open 2 inches. Through the gap she could see Sloane standing in front of a full-length mirror in a cream-colored sundress, practicing expressions. She tilted her head, smiled, adjusted the smile, tried surprise, tried tenderness, discarded tenderness, for something closer to shy admiration. Each expression was tested, examined, corrected. A young assistant sat on the bed behind her with a phone, taking photos from different angles, checking the lighting. This was not a woman getting ready. This was a woman rehearsing. Sloane's eye caught movement. She turned. The rehearsal vanished instantly, replaced by something flat and cold. Leave the towels and close the door. Maren set them on the hall table and walked away without a word. The afternoon slowed. Staff prepared the dining room for the next day's lunch. Maren was assigned to the upstairs corridor, carrying trays between the kitchen and the service hallway that connected to the formal rooms. Around 3 o'clock, she was moving through the narrow passage near the east staircase with a tray of coffee service. A silver pot, 2 porcelain cups, a small pitcher of cream arranged on a lacquered tray. The passage turned sharply at the base of the stairs. Sloane came around the corner at the same moment. Maren's elbow caught the edge of Sloane's sleeve. The contact was almost nothing, a brush, a millimeter of fabric displaced. 1 cup shifted on the tray, but didn't fall. Sloane stopped. She looked at the sleeve as though it had been set on fire. Then she looked at Maren. Do you have any idea what this costs? I'm sorry I didn't see. You people never see. That's the entire problem. Sloane stepped closer. Her voice dropped to something private and sharp, meant only for the person standing in front of her. If anything on me is damaged, I will make sure you never work in any home worth working in again. And I will enjoy doing it. She held the stare for 3 full seconds. Then she stepped past Maren and continued up the staircase, adjusting her hair as she went, as if the interaction had already ceased to exist. A young woman from the kitchen staff had seen the whole thing from the end of the corridor. Her name was Inez. She had worked at Crestwood for 4 weeks and had already learned that survival here meant becoming invisible. She walked over to Maren slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. Are you okay? I'm fine. She does that. Not when anyone important is around, but she does it. Maren looked at the staircase where Sloane had disappeared. I know, Inez hesitated. You should tell someone. I will, Maren said. Just not yet. Was arrived the next day at noon. He stepped out of his car holding a gift bag from a boutique chocolate shop on the Upper West Side. He had remembered Sloane mentioning once, offhandedly, at dinner, that she loved dark chocolate with sea salt. He had written it down in his phone, under a note titled Things She Loves. That was the kind of man Wes was. He recorded the small things because he believed they were the big things. Sloane appeared at the front steps, like someone stepping into a scene she had already blocked. Her voice was soft. She touched his face with both hands. She opened the gift bag and held it against her chest as though he had given her something irreplaceable. She turned toward the staff visible through the front window and smiled warmly. I know how hard all of you work to make this place beautiful. It really shows. A staff member near the door blinked, surprised. Wes watched his girlfriend and smiled with the expression of a man who had been told he was lucky so many times, he had started to believe it was something he deserved. Maren stood behind the kitchen service window. She watched Wes' face as he looked at Sloane. He could not see the corridor. He could not hear the voice that had threatened a woman in a gray uniform over a sleeve. He did not know any of it. She had raised this boy. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. Their mother died when Maren was 19 and Wes was 15. Maren had deferred her first semester at Wharton to stay home. She had helped him through 3 years of high school. She had driven him to college orientation, assembled his dorm furniture, sat on the floor of his room, and eaten cold pizza at midnight. While he talked about how nervous he was, she had built her company and protected her brothers simultaneously, and she had never once let him see the cost of either. He looked right at her from across the foyer. His eyes passed over her, the way eyes pass over furniture. That was the moment, not the threat in the corridor. Lunch was served in the formal dining room under a chandelier that probably cost more than the first car Maren ever drove. She served quietly. She poured water. She cleared plates. She heard every word. Vivian seated herself at the head of the table and spent the first 8 minutes steering every conversation back to the Beckford family's legacy. She mentioned the house 3 times, the garden twice, and a great-uncle who had known a senator once in a way that implied the senator had been the lucky one. She praised Wes's grounded energy and then spent 5 minutes explaining how Sloane's poise was entirely her doing. After the main course, Wes excused himself to make a call. Vivian and Sloane moved to the sunroom. The door was left open 2 inches. Maren carried a stack of dessert plates past it and stopped. Vivian spoke first. He's simpler than I expected. Sweet, generous, not particularly sharp about people. Those 3 things together are essentially a blank check. Sloane's voice. He's not simple, he just needs to feel safe. Make him feel safe and he'll hand you the keys to everything. And the sister? A pause. Then Sloane measured. The sister is the obstacle. She built that company from nothing, which means she watches everything. You can't charm her, you can't pressure her, you wait. You put distance between them slowly. You make him feel like she's controlling, like she doesn't trust his judgment. He's already halfway there. One more argument and he'll stop calling her entirely. And then the prenup conversation goes exactly how we want it to. His lawyer will suggest one. We'll agree to it graciously, and then 6 months after the wedding, we renegotiate the terms because the marriage has proven itself. Vivian laughed quietly. You learned well. I learned from watching you with Dad. Your father was a good man. He was a useful man. There's a difference. Silence. Then Vivian again, lighter. If the sister fights it, we make sure everyone around Wes agrees she's the problem. Jealous, controlling, can't let go. It writes itself. People love that story. Maren walked away from the door. She did not run. She did not stop. She found the utility closet at the end of the service hallway, stepped inside and stood in the dark for 60 seconds, with her back against the wall. She breathed. She pressed her hands flat against the cold concrete. Then she took her phone from the pocket beneath her apron and typed one message to Anita Wallace, her chief of staff, a woman who had been with her since the company was 4 people and a shared desk. Send both cars. Bring Kotri. Bring the files I asked you to prepare. 30 minutes. She put the phone back. She returned to the dining room. She refilled the water glasses. She waited. The sound arrived before anything else. 2 black SUVs came up the Crestwood driveway, moving with the kind of deliberate slowness that says this is not a visit, this is an arrival. Each vehicle had a small silver A on the rear panel, the Aldridge Group logo that appeared on 17 buildings across 3 states. Vivian noticed first. She went to the window. Her face changed. She recognized the insignia. She started calculating. She smoothed her dress and moved toward the front door, with the energy of a woman preparing to receive an important guest. "They've sent someone from the company," she said to Sloane. "This is a good sign. They're taking the family connection seriously." Sloane stood beside Wes, her hand resting on his forearm, her expression warm and composed. The front door opened. 2 assistants entered, both in dark suits. Then Anita Wallace, carrying a leather portfolio. Then Dev Khatri, the Aldridge Group's general counsel, a man known in commercial real estate circles for never raising his voice and never losing. Khatri walked past Vivienne without a word. She extended a hand. He had already moved on. He crossed the sitting room. He passed Wes, who stood straight, confused, trying to understand why his sister's legal team was in his girlfriend's mother's house. He passed Sloane, whose fingers tightened slightly on Wes's arm, but whose face remained absolutely still. He stopped in front of a woman in a gray cotton uniform standing near the far wall, holding a stack of folded napkins. He gave a small, precise nod. "Ms. Aldridge." The room didn't collapse all at once. It happened in waves. First the staff, who froze in a ripple that started at the kitchen door and moved outward. Then Vivienne, who grabbed the back of a dining chair and didn't let go. Then Sloane, who took one step backward and found the edge of the sofa behind her knees. Wes went completely white. Maren set the napkins down on the sideboard. She removed the apron and folded it neatly. She pulled the elastic from her hair and let it fall past her shoulders. Her posture shifted. Not dramatically. Just completely. She stood the way she stood in boardrooms, the way she stood in negotiations, the way she stood when she had already won and was deciding how much mercy the situation deserved. She turned to face the room. "Your daughter," she said to Vivienne, her voice level and unhurried, "is very convincing. I'll give her that." Vivienne opened her mouth. "Mrs. Aldridge, this is clearly a misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding. There has been clarity." Maren looked at Anita. "Please ask anyone from the household staff who worked yesterday to come to the sitting room." Inez came first. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She did not look at Sloane when she spoke. She described the corridor near the east staircase. She described the words used. She described the tone. She was specific about what it felt like to watch it happen. And no, there was nothing she could do. 3 others followed. A caterer who had been humiliated in front of the entire kitchen for a plating choice that was actually correct. A housekeeper who had been made to re-clean a window while Vivienne stood behind her in silence for 4 straight minutes. A groundskeeper who had overheard Sloane on the phone 3 weeks earlier, telling someone she referred to as my consultant that the engagement needed to happen before September because the financial window is narrow. Each statement landed in the room and stayed. Vivienne's denials grew shorter. Then they stopped. Sloane tried once. She turned to Wes. "This is manipulation. She's doing exactly what I told you she would do. She's trying to control you." Wes didn't respond. He was looking at his sister. "She dressed up as a maid, Wes. Doesn't that tell you everything about who she really is?" Wes still didn't respond. His eyes had not moved from Maren. Something was happening behind them that Sloane could not reach, could not redirect, could not perform her way through. He was remembering. He was remembering Maren at 19, deferring college to stay with him. Maren at 22, sending him money she didn't have. Maren at 27, flying across the country for his college graduation, with a fever she didn't mention until the ceremony was over. He was remembering every time she had been honest with him at the cost of his approval, because she loved him enough to lose that. He walked across the room. He stopped in front of her. His jaw was tight and his eyes were wet and his voice cracked before he finished speaking. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Just those. Maren looked at him for a long moment. She did not say it was okay, because it wasn't. Not yet. She didn't say she forgave him, because forgiveness was a process, not a single moment. She put one hand on the side of his face, the same way she had when he was 15, and their mother had just died and the world was too large and too empty. "I know," she said. "We'll fix it." She turned back to the room and delivered the rest simply. The engagement was over. The Aldridge Group's legal team would be reviewing all financial interactions between the Beckford family and any entities connected to Wes's personal accounts over the past 7 months. 2 wire transfers made from a joint account Sloane had convinced Wes to open would be investigated and reversed. The mortgage on Crestwood, which Maren's team had quietly researched that morning and discovered was secured through a lender that had received a personal reference from Wes, would be subject to standard review without any preferential treatment. Sloane stood. "You can't do this." "I can," Maren said, "and you knew I could. That's why your entire strategy depended on removing me from his life first." Sloane sat back down. Vivian began to cry. They were the kind of tears that arrive only after every other tactic has been exhausted. Maren had seen tears like that before, in negotiations, in boardrooms. They were the tears of someone who had run out of moves and was hoping sympathy might function as a last resort. Maren did not comfort her. She walked toward the door. She paused. Inez, the young woman near the wall, looked up. "Come with us." The aftermath didn't make headlines. It didn't need to. In the kind of circles where Maren moved, information traveled through conversation, through a raised eyebrow at a dinner party, through a name mentioned once and then never again. Within 2 weeks, the Beckford social calendar began to thin. Within 6 weeks, the mortgage review was complete. The preferential terms were rescinded, and the refinancing options available to Vivian were significantly less generous than the ones she had grown accustomed to. Crestwood went on the market in November. It sold for less than Vivian wanted. She moved to a rental in Stamford and stopped attending the events where people might ask questions she didn't want to answer. Sloane's name circulated quietly through the networks that mattered, not through scandal but through absence. She was no longer invited. She attended 2 gatherings that fall. At the second one, someone asked how Wes was doing, and the way the question was phrased made it clear they already knew the answer. She stopped going after that. Wes spent the next year working. Not at the company, not yet. Maren assigned him to the Aldridge Foundation, the nonprofit arm she had built to fund housing programs in underserved communities. He started at the ground level. He answered phones. He reviewed grant applications. He visited project sites in neighborhoods he had never been to, and talked to people whose lives looked nothing like his. He learned what a building meant to someone who had never had a permanent address. He learned what trust looked like when it wasn't given easily. He called Maren every Sunday. The calls were long again. Maren hired Inez full-time. She enrolled her in a part-time business program at Pace, paid the tuition, and gave her a position in property management that matched her skills, which turned out to be considerable. Inez had a memory for systems and a quiet confidence that had been buried under 4 weeks of being told she was inadequate. Once the pressure was removed, the competence surfaced fast. On a Saturday in April, Maren and Inez walked through the courtyard of a new mixed-income housing development the Aldridge Group had just completed in the Bronx. The building was 7 stories. The courtyard had trees that were still young and thin, planted by a landscaping team Wes had helped coordinate the week before. He was across the courtyard now, talking to a tenant about a maintenance issue, writing something down on a clipboard. Inez watched him for a moment. "You could have destroyed them completely. You had enough." "Yes. So why didn't you?" Maren looked at the young trees, at the building she had built, at her brother bending down to listen to an elderly woman describe a leaky faucet with the seriousness of someone who understood that small things were not small. "Because the point was never destruction," she said. "The point was truth." Inez was quiet for a while. Wes looked up from across the courtyard. He saw them watching. He raised a hand. Maren raised hers back. "The ones who mistake kindness for weakness," she said, "are always the ones most surprised when kindness turns out to have been paying attention the entire time." Inez thought about that for a long time afterward. So did everyone who had stood in that room at Crestwood and watched a woman in a gray uniform set down a stack of napkins and change the shape of everything around her.